I've spoken a couple of times, and I think the first time was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, when I was actually covering for Dave once on his Webmaster radio show. And I was speaking with Mikkel Svensson, and we spoke very briefly about zone file transfers. Some CCTLDs, country-level domain names, do not publish public zone files. Who knows what DNS is? Put your hand up, please. Who knows what a zone file transfer is within the domain name system? Right, a lot less. I guess I better describe it a little bit. The co.uk. Can you go to the co.uk domain name server and say, give me all of the co.uk domain names? Many years ago, you could, and you got the name server information from that, but they stopped doing that. .com, as an example, has a public zone file. You can request to their .com and say, give me all the name server information for all of these names underneath. It's public. Where there isn't the ability to get a public zone file, i.e. all of the domain names, subdomains under co.uk or others, is you have more of an ability to escape a reduction in domain name value within Google and other search engines' algorithm. You can still trip up yourself, but you have the opportunity at that starting point, if you do the other stuff right, that you can take a domain name that hasn't dropped, it must be outside of the drop cycle, acquire it, take over, start working with it, and it will continue to use the value that that domain had built previously. If it isn't a domain, or rather if it is a domain that has a public zone file, you won't have that ability.
Well, are you going to lose the value by purchasing that domain and owning multiple domains, or are you only losing the value of the links between the domains you own?
If you say that, forget about links for a moment, and say that Bob spoke about authority, and so does everyone, lots of people in the industry, I like using two other words, status and oomph. The reason I say that is authority is mentioned in various patents and white papers. I've never heard status used, so I won't say what specifics are, but you know it when you see it. It's like porn. You know it when you see it. It's not art, that's porn. But try to define it is quite hard. So the oomph factor that a domain as a whole has built up, however it be, whether it be an operator's domain, as we spoke about before, they naturally build that oomph and status factor. You may acquire a domain that has that oomph and status factor. If it's got a public zone file record, it's a much less chance of you retaining that oomph and status. Whereas a private zone file, i.e. something that's not available, you have, if you don't trip up in other areas, can move that status around.
Are you changing the content and everything? I mean, I help companies basically buy other companies from time to time. And as long as you stage it over a period of time, whatever you do, don't like buy the site, rebrand it, change the DNS, change the IP all in a one. You're not asking for trouble, you're asking to trip Google up. And you know what I mean? Google's not really that bothered. If you go out and buy a website, change the DNS so you're going to put onto a new IP address, change the DNS, leave the registrar in the other person's names to start off with for a little while, maybe it's 3 months, get an official agreement in there. After 3 months, once the transfer from the IP and the DNS is settled in, then change the whois data. Once that's settled in, then change the design. You don't have to do it in that order, but just don't do it all at once. And the other way, of course, is just take all the content, and if you're going to try to transfer equity to the new site, take all that content, keep the same URL structure as the old site has got, put that through, 301 redirect straight on top of it, and then let that sink in. Once the transfer has gone from domain A to domain B, then you can start restructuring it. But it's just a timing process. It's like most people trip up because they rush it. A good friend of mine was like ranking, I don't know, #2 for handbags or something stupid like that. And he bought the domain. He was like, this is awesome. And before he'd even had a chance to say to the client, this is what you've got to do, the client would put a new site on there, transfer the DNS, put it on a new Rackspace server in the UK. It was hosted in Germany originally, and it just died. 2 months later, it came back. So it's not the end of the world. It's just that if that was, like, if you just paid $1 million for something like that, and you were hoping that the revenue from that was going to kind of like cover the loan, that gets a bit like seat of the pants stuff. But you can, if you stage it slowly and carefully, you shouldn't have any issues.
Yeah, and also just to add, I mean, you also might want to look at what you're doing it for and consider any other alternatives. You know, I mean, it's you know, it's relatively accepted practice now to lease that domain from somebody for 10, 20 years, keep it in their name, keep all that sort of original authority intact, and just, you know, it depends on what you're going to use it for, though. Like if it's, you know, if I own Bob.com and it's because I'm Bob and you want to buy it because you're going to start a site like Bingo Old Bitches. Sorry, I forget about the cursing. Anyway, but you know, if you want to change it entirely, then you don't want to do that. But if you're buying something within the gaming space, you're going to keep it for that reason. You're going to slowly transition it over. You should consider that, you know, maybe rather than just straight acquiring it, acquire it from them, get a rock solid contract, but keep it in their name. Keep, you know, keep as many things intact as you can so you can make the most out of it as an alternative to slow transition. It's the same thing as slow transition, but maybe never actually transitioning it over.
All right, we have 15 minutes left. How about each of us pick out a top tip for affiliates?
Top tip for affiliates?
Top tip. My top tip, I'll start.
You have an agenda.
It's the Gary Bill show.
Moderator here, huh?
Go ahead. Give us your top
I
tip.
mean,
Now
there's
you've got us
a lot
all
of people
excited.
here. We're talking about one website and another. I mean, we need something that applies to everybody.
Okay, give us the tip.
You are one to talk. Anyway, all right, my top tip on affiliate is that geo-targeting has changed in the EU. Building your site and making subdomains versus subdirectories and using geo-targeting on Google, which just came into place, I think, October last month, or October last year, it's getting ahead of steam. It's happening very quickly, and most of the big companies don't have the ability with their IT companies to implement this stuff for 6 or 12 months. So as affiliates, you can take and build these subdomains. You can target them with geo-targeting and hit a very soft market.
Okay. Jason.
Sorry, I didn't understand a bloody word of that. But, top tip for affiliates, go and see your affiliate manager and get a higher CPA.
That's a good tip.
That's a good tip.
That's not an easy way. It's easier to rank than it is to get a higher CPA sometimes.
Okay, so we all know at the moment Bing is one of the easiest search engines to rank in. Okay, get a crappy domain name with the keywords you want to rank it. Rank it in the top 3 for the keywords you want to go for. Conditionally 301 redirect. So basically you're cloaking Google to whatever site you want it to do. Then basically link build to msn.encarta.com keyword. Because if you're in the top 3 of Bing, you get clean links out of Encarta.
That's really
That's
good.
very good, actually.
That's very, very
Before,
good.
Bob, can I do a proper
Did
one?
everyone follow that? Because that was actually
That
clever.
that was great.
That was as good as the CPA thing. Did everyone get that? Dave, can you go, just do that once more slowly? No, you're not a fast talker, but do it a little bit more slowly, a little bit more in depth.